Oregon Files podcast. First, our disclaimer. We are amateur podcasters simply for entertainment. If we misquote or offend, it was not on purpose to do so. Now, today we have a special guest, Ryan Finlay, from the Roseburg Tracker. But first, my co-host, Elliot Bowman.
Thank you, Mark. I need to quickly give a shout out to our newish sponsor, Too Shy Brewing, where they provide brew. We brew for people who love beer. You can find them on 1308 Northwest Park Street, Suite 100 in Roseburg, Oregon. They also, Too Shy, they constantly on a daily basis, they update their Instagram with rotating food trucks. They have plenty of good beers on tap, ciders, and they're really good environment. They're really welcoming. We're just so stoked to have them on board.
Great local business.
Yes, we love Too Shy.
And our other sponsor we want to shout out is Video Games Plus and Level Up Frozen Yogurt here in Roseburg, Oregon. They're open 7 days a week. They're off Stevens. And Level Up Frozen Yogurt has new flavors every month, some dairy-free, and over 50 toppings, including fresh fruit. Also come and explore their impressive new video game selection, Blu-rays, all kinds of gifts. They have gift certificates, disc golf, Magic, and Pokemon. Anything you could want. And back to Eliev, who's our special guest today?
All right, Mark. Thank you so much. Today we have episode 24, which is unbelievably awesome. And just like today's guest, he's also unbelievably awesome. Mark, have you ever heard the saying, not all heroes wear capes?
I have.
That's good. Well, today is a great example of that because we have someone who is the eyes and ears of our community. Not only is he just an amazing individual, but he does so many other projects, cleanups, and just organizes a lot. You'll hear he does a lot of things in our community. It's simply amazing what this guy does. So we're truly excited to get to know and figure out what makes this guy tick. You know, what drives the man, the myth, the legend, Ryan Finlay. And this interview was actually pre-recorded earlier, so we will jump right into it. You're such an interesting guy, and I know you have like tons of stuff going on, so it's kind of hard to really start, you doing a lot of like local community projects and things like that. What's kind of like, I would say like, what's kind of like a high level overview of things that you've kind of worked on?
One of the first things I did when I got back into town, we moved into Hillcrest, and this is where my parents were living, and there was just a lot of crime going on. It was like, it was a big crime spree going on. It was a lot of mail thefts, package thefts, car break-ins, but it was like every single day. And I was connected with enough people in the neighborhood that I was hearing about them every day, and I was like, what's everybody doing about this? Like, is anybody communicating? And they weren't. That was the problem. Like, there would be a whole bunch of mail thefts in one street one day, and then the next day, the next street would get ripped. But nobody was communicating, so it would just keep going. And it was going unchecked for like weeks at a time. And so I was like, this is crazy. Like, we live in the day of technology. Like, why don't we organize a little bit? So I helped start a neighborhood watch group, or kind of a neighborhood group. Yeah, and then we organized a group of like little neighborhood patrollers. Like, we didn't have badges or anything, but we'd ride around on electric scooters and electric skateboards. And yeah, and just we had little radios, and now we use Telegram. But yeah, and so we have the groups now, over 800 neighbors, and we hand vetted everybody. So that's cool. So not much gets by us. Everything gets reported, which is
awesome.
Yeah. So it's just the neighborhood just kind of works together, and it was a lot of. I mean, it still is. We still do it. We haven't been on scooters as much lately, but even at night we'd like take flashlights around and like patrol, and it made a big impact. Like, it was a dramatic.
But I love you did it from like a grassroots movement where you're like, no, we're done with this. Let's band together. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Mostly people, they'll say something and be like, oh, we got to do something about this. Not a lot of people actually take the action and be like, that's super cool.
Yeah, it helped. I think Andrea Zielinski's in it, and she's a city councilor, and at the time she was working for the sheriff's office, and so she was helpful in that she'd kind of give us context for it, because it's easy to complain, and it's easy, like the knee-jerk reaction for everyone's to just blame everything on the police.
Yeah.
Why aren't they here? Like, we pay so much taxes. Yeah. It's like, it's true, but the police are also understaffed, and they also can't just sit around in random neighborhoods just like trying to prevent porch pirates from stealing packages. Yeah. So she encouraged me to go through the Citizen Police Academy and went through that. And that's like super helpful. And just a quick plug, I would recommend everyone going through that. Because you come out of it with just a deep understanding of how local law enforcement works and the struggles they have where their hands are tied, how you can help. You get to understand a lot more of the context. So like when things happen, you can kind of be a go-between. It's not just everyone just dumping on the police department. Why aren't you here? Like you can actually explain to neighbors like, hey, look, like we can't just like we actually need to witness something before, we can just call them in. Once you succeed and you build a neighborhood group with 800 people, like guess what? Then you have another problem of like everybody's going to, every little suspicious person walking down the street. Well, how do you handle that? Like there's a lot that goes into how to do that well, how to be helpful to our local law enforcement.
Because you don't want calls to say, hey, there's some guy on a scooter walking around with a flashlight.
I once, funny side story, Abraham and I once got called into the state police after we rescued a goose at the duck pond. And a state policeman showed up at our doorstep because someone had called 911 that we had like abducted a goose. And this is an injured goose that was going to die because it had bumblefoot. And we had like rescued it and put it into a dog crate, and we took it home because we were transporting it to a rehabber. We're critter carriers for a local wildlife rescue group.
Oh, very cool.
So that's my like. So people are vigilant, and we got called in ourselves.
Hey, part of the group.
I think my encouragement to the community is if you see a young kid and his dad capturing a wild animal, like just go up and talk to him and say, hey, what's going on? Before you go straight to the most extreme response of like, hey, let's call 911.
What's your plans for that goose? Yeah.
That's not a golden goose.
They're gonna eat it. They're gonna eat it.
Yeah.
Oh, we have that many kids.
So did this what translated to what became the Roseburg Tracker then? Is this the start was?
It was before Roseburg Tracker. I don't know exactly the timeline, but at least several months. And then, at a certain point, I started recognizing, because it was a private group. We actually made it like, it's basically a secret group. You have to be like invited into it by other neighbors. But I just started recognizing a need for, what we'd done out in Hawaii, that there could be value added to the Roseburg and greater Douglas County communities by having a resource here. So, or a tracker group here. So, I started Roseburg Tracker back in 2018.
And how many people do you have in that group now?
It's up to 22,000. So
that's amazing.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember it was when the fire started out in Glide. That's when I first got wind of it. Yeah. And I followed it. And I'll tell you, the news you put out, the information you put out, it's accurate. It's always good. And that's why I just remember it blowing up. Like everyone was going, hey, are you in the Roseburg Tracker? Like that became a thing in Roseburg. Like everyone was asking each other. Yeah.
It's funny because it was very similar with Hawaii Tracker. I started Hawaii Tracker when we were moving to Hawaii and we were about 6 months out. And I was trying to just find a way to connect with the community and like help them out. And I knew that we had an eruption that was basically heading down the mountain towards the little community that we were moving to.
Oh, wow.
So very similar to a wildfire, eruptions, volcanic eruptions are 24-hour-a-day disasters. And it's a little community, not as dense as Roseburg, but population-wise, there's about that many people. But it's kind of a little bit of a news desert. There was no newspaper. Thing is with 24-hour-a-day disasters, like traditional media, they're just not used to handling that. Like that's typically like what maybe like a TV reporter like on scene would do. But like the reality is like you're getting the information from like 10 to 15 different sources, and it's constantly updating all throughout the day. I created a group called Lava Tracker just to track that eruption. It grew quite a bit, a couple thousand people, and then that eruption stopped and it went back into the ocean. But I kept it going because it was kind of a cool little community that was built. And I slogged away for 4 years. And after 4 years is when I moved back to Roseburg in 2018. And at that point, there was about almost 4,000 people in that group. And in 2018, a huge eruption happened right after we left, like 3 or 4 months after we left, in our old community. Oh my God. The lava literally erupted right out of the middle of a subdivision right next to where we were living.
What? Whoa. Like out of the ground?
Right, straight up out of the ground. Yeah. I was here at the time. A week or two before that happened, all of a sudden I started seeing like a bunch of all weird activity, and I started hearing about like weird things happening up at the national park, and then all of a sudden all the lava drained out of the crater up at Volcanoes National Park, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute, this is crazy. And so it literally just disappeared. Millions and millions of gallons of lava just went down into the ground, and everyone's like, uh-oh.
Where's it going?
And then, and then all of a sudden they started detecting earthquakes moving towards the subdivision. Well, then I was like, oh, crud. Like, So we started doing research and like, when was the last time this happened? And it was like 1955. There was an eruption in the exact same spot. And it was like, basically there was a line of fissures that had opened up back in 1955. I started like paying a ton of like really close attention to this. I'm like, oh man, this isn't good. Like if this keeps going, like it could erupt right in the middle of the subdivision. And at the time, this is where I'm going to be a little bit critical of like local government out there. Like they refused to warn residents that an eruption was probably imminent in their neighborhood or right in their vicinity. They wouldn't warn them. And it was just for whatever reason, they wanted to wait until after it erupted to tell people. And so 2 days before it actually came out of the ground, I published a map to Hawaii Tracker. I basically circled a spot on the map and I said, you guys, based on 1955, like the odds are the lava is going to come out inside this map. And I basically circled Leilani Estate subdivision down to the ocean. And 2 days later, it popped out right in the middle of the circle. That was a big thing because like I was taking a pretty big risk. Like what in the world are you doing? You're trying to panic the island, like you idiot. But it's like they were not on X marks the spot here. They weren't being helpful, and at all. Looking back, a lot of destruction happened because nobody got their stuff out. People didn't get their animals. Horrible things happened because of it. Like because basically when the eruption happened, people had to abandon everything. No time to pack. No time to. If someone's cat was outside, no time to get their cat. It ended up burying like it's like either 800 or 900 homes.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, under 20 to 40 feet of lava. People lost all their like priceless possessions, like memorabilia and things like that. And it's like government needs to, even if you need to do what's best for the people, even if you might get some. Guess what? The eruption didn't happen inside that circle. Okay, well at least people were warned, and you cared enough about them. And I just it's frustrating. And I hope that's not a trend in government going forward. The group went from 4,000 people at the beginning of that eruption, 2018, and we're right at 90. We're just about at 90,000 today. So
Roseburg Tracker or the Hawaii Tracker or whatever. I mean, if it's a credible and the source is valued, it's
because I like a lot of the Roseburg Tracker stuff you post actually like you said, data, maps, things things that make sense for people to comprehend. You're not just making it up. Like, no, here's proof, guys.
At a most basic level, like trust is everything when it comes to like news and media. And if you're not trustworthy, then people shouldn't listen to you or follow you at all. And I mean, that's why I encourage everyone. Like if people find the group or Roseburg Tracker or Hawaii, if they find it like not a trustworthy place, then definitely stop. Don't continue to tune in. And we take pride in it, right? Because like it is like you want people to trust you, and you be competitive about that. Like you do your best to make sure the information's accurate. And
all right, Ryan, my next question for you is let's go a little bit more in your background here. You said you lived in Roseburg most of your life. What have you done in Roseburg?
I made a list of a bunch of my jobs. One of my first jobs was out at Norris Blueberry Farms. I was a blueberry picker. I wasn't the fastest, certainly. I grew to love blueberries out there, and I still get berries from them today.
Love it.
After that, right when I was 16, I got a job at Stewart Park, the golf course. I was a driving range worker / just took care of golf carts. And I got that job because whoever was doing it didn't show up. And I was just sitting there hitting balls. And I remember the golf pro complaining about the person not showing up. And I said, I'll do it for free if you'll just give me some driving. I volunteered to do it for some driving range tokens. And they're like, okay. Anyways, I did that a couple times, and they're like, all right, when can you start working for us?
That's awesome.
Yeah. After that, I worked for the Neil Company Real Estate. I think it's Century 21 now, but I worked for Neil and Kathy Hummel. I was a web designer for them in the mid 90s.
I love it.
Way back at the beginning of the internet. Yes. Like I was a nerd back then. I still am a nerd. Yeah, I worked over at their office and helped them update listings and put all their listings on the internet.
Neil's a cool guy.
Yeah. They were on top of it. Like they were one of the earlier companies to have a pretty big web presence. After that, I worked for the Roseburg School District. It was a summer job, and basically I cleaned every single computer and mouse and keyboard in the Roseburg School District for two summers in a row. My buddy Bobby and I, probably the best part about that job is we would go into the computer labs. We would take occasional breaks, just occasional, and set the high records for all like the Math Blaster and like all the games on these are like old ancient Apple IIes. And we'd go on there and like literally set the top scores, and we'd like try super hard so that like the records wouldn't be broken by any of the kids. Like, who did this? And we'd go around. Anyways, we set records at most of the schools. But that was a lot of fun. After that, Linus Oaks, I was a resident assistant there. Awesome job. I became really good friends with some of the residents there. Friends with them long after I wasn't working there anymore. It's kind of like, so Linus Oaks is still here in town. Yeah. Any young person, it's an awesome job. You almost inherit grandparents working there.
Oh, that's cool. That's
yeah.
To look at it.
Yeah. They're incredible people. A lot of them are local, and then some obviously move into the area. Yeah, highly recommend young people working at Linus Oaks. Roseburg Forest Products. I worked there for 2.5 weeks.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I got a job there, and I think I was on the shift where early evening till sometime in the middle of the night, and it was really hard. It was super depressing because I was like, all of a sudden I couldn't do anything with my friends in the summer. And, summer is like the glory of living here, and and as a kid, you're just, I'm gonna lose all, like, I'm not gonna be able to do anything. And so I worked super hard for 2.5 weeks, but I couldn't. I worked at Umpqua Bank. I was a teller out in Sutherland. That was a cool job. I finally had to get dress clothes. Had to buy like not a full suit, slacks and dress shirts. And
I know a lot of cool people there. They've grown like crazy too.
Yeah,
that's a big company now.
Yeah, I think I got to meet. Let's see, I got to meet Ray Davis one time. He came out. It was a great job. Again, made good friendships. After that, I was a youth pastor here in town in Roseburg. Over here in North Roseburg. It was called Evangelical Free Church. It's kind of over behind Clinton Newell. Okay. But I did that for a couple of years. That was awesome. Just working with junior hires and high schoolers. I want to say it was 2 years. Right after that, moved to Portland, went to Multnomah. At the time, it was Multnomah Bible School. Met my wife. We got married at the end of that school year. We lived there for just a little bit. I think I worked at an Olive Garden in Portland. Just starting off, like you just have to do what you have to do to pay your bills, right, basically. Yeah. And being a server is an interesting job. It's hard work. It's a little stressful, but I enjoyed it. But then wife got pregnant. We better get back a little bit closer to home. Yeah. So we moved back to Roseburg while my wife was pregnant with our oldest, Moses. So when I moved back here, first thing I did was just pick up odd jobs. So it's just using connections, do landscaping and all sorts of stuff. And then I got a job at Good Vibrations over here on Stevens. Yeah. I was a home installation, home audio and video install. And ultimately, starting a family, I needed to make a little bit more money. Yeah. I actually went from there I got hired on at Central Oregon and Pacific Railroad. So it was a good paying job, excellent benefits, very hard job to put it lightly. I kind of often refer to it as it was kind of like boot camp. Wow. It's like getting in the military, physically. Yeah. That job beats you down. I was doing track maintenance, and you start off and you're working with tools that are 75 pounds, and you hold them all day long, and you come home and your hands you can't shake someone's hand because you're so tired you go straight to bed, and then you got to wake back up, and it was pretty rough. Yeah, very physically demanding job, and it was good. I made it 16 months at the railroad. Wow. Yeah. No, that was a miracle. Yeah. That was a miracle. So that one ended. I had a buddy of mine from school who's planting a church out in Hawaii, and he had reached out to me, and he goes, "Hey, we'd still love it if you and your family would want to come back out and help us with this." Oh, wow. And so I was sitting here working a very difficult job at the railroad, and challenging environment. It's extremely hot. It's a hard job. And then faced with the opportunity to move to Hawaii, we decided to do it. Went from the railroad to Hawaii.
So how many kids did you have by then when you guys moved to Hawaii? 2.
Okay. So the oldest. Yeah. So Moses and Elijah, we had just the 2 boys. So we moved out to Hawaii. I just got a job in construction. I started working for a company that built Kit Island homes, kind of prefabbed homes. That was awesome. Hawaii was awesome. Everything was going great. And then the great financial crisis happened, the housing crash. And when that happened, it hit mainland first, and then 6 months later, it hit the island. And when it hit the island, it just, the entire economy just ground to a halt. Because it's kind of a tourist-based economy out there. Yeah. And so when that happened, it was there was no job. Everyone got laid off. And we were young and poor. And I was like, oh my goodness, we're going to get trapped here on the island because it's expensive to live there too. And so we had to leave. We didn't want to leave, but we had to. So we moved back to Portland, kept doing construction back there in Portland for a couple of years, just doing construction, concrete polishing. And then I put a kind of a break in this because that's right after those 2 years of construction in Portland, I kind of took the leap and started becoming self-employed.
Nice.
So like my knee-jerk reaction, because I'd always loved business, and I had the entrepreneurial blood in me for a long time. And so I was like, well, what am I going to do? Well, I will be the contractor. And so I went out and got my contractor's license, jumped through all the hoops and everything. And then I started doing work in Portland, and I very quickly was like, I came to this realization, like I could spend the next like several decades just learning how to get really good at working on all these, like, because in Portland you have like 130-year-old houses to like super new fancy houses, and every single one of them's like different time periods and materials. And I was like, Mike, I'm not interested enough in this. Like I was like very quickly, I'm not going to make a career out of this. And so I kind of started over. I ended up like, well, I like buying and selling things. But growing up, you don't, there's no business education that you get in public schools.
Not at all.
You just have to figure it out on your own. And I was like, well, I think I'd love to just buy and sell things on Craigslist. So I just started buying and selling on Craigslist. Anything I could make a profit on. Okay. Like, I mean, if it was like a piece of wooden furniture, or any appliances, any tools, anything that I'm like, oh man, that's underpriced. Yeah. It was like just arbitrage. Like I'll go quickly buy it from these people and then sell it for its proper price, basically. But very quickly you start like, okay, then you start using your brain. And I kept selling these, like I'd go pick up free appliances, for example. Okay. And some guy would come and be like, oh, he'd give me $50 for this broken appliance. And I was like, what in the world's going on? Like, why is this guy doing this? Why is he giving me $50 for this broken appliance? I'm like, and finally one of these guys had pity on me. He's like, dude, it's so easy to repair these appliances. Just this such and such, just go onto YouTube and type in such and such. And I'm like, oh man, unlock code. And I'm like, that's it. And so I think the next broken dryer that I got in, I was just like, I'm going to fix this thing.
Right. Yeah. I love it.
That just started me down the road of like reading how to repair appliances, like little websites and YouTube videos and things like that. And started buying and selling appliances and fixing them, getting better and better. Long story short, I did that. I ended up going into that full time, bought trailer. I ended up buying and selling over 4,000 appliances out of my single car garage in Portland.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and then I started an online appliance school basically, and because I was blogging about this at the same time, and people started asking me like, "Oh, would you do consulting?" And anyway, so I turned it into a course and probably taught 600 or 700 people across the U.S. how to get in, and some of them have gone on to build huge appliance companies all across the country, and including one here in town.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
I love that. I love that. Yeah, okay. And like everyone who listens to your work, it's like 80% of like every Roseburg person, as worked at one of those places. But I like your stuff that it really is, you're starting from the bootstraps. Like you're like, no, I'm going to do this and that kind of stuff. Very cool, man. So what other local community projects, what other things you're involved with?
Yeah, so I think, after the neighborhood thing, I started getting involved over, the big focus was over in kind of the Stewart Park, the Duck Pond area. Yeah. I think it was 2019 when we first got started. It had kind of gotten they just let it go in a sense. And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but just like maintenance wise, it had gotten filled with camps. The camps, it just kind of it becomes like a perpetual thing. Like the more camps, then the less maintenance, and then the community wasn't using it. And then it just started getting sketchier and sketchier. And so we started volunteering to clean up camps, clean up trash, started getting involved in landscaping type of things, opening up line of sight so people feel comfortable walking through the park. Because if it's a caged in, dark, gloomy place, you're not going to get...
Yeah, it's not safe.
No, it's not safe. No, nobody's going to feel comfortable. So there's a way you can design the landscaping, like just how you trim trees, for example. Like you just open it up, make it so you can see all the way through. So we just started doing stuff like that all through there. And we did cleanups for like 6 months straight. Under bridges and just all over those. We got volunteers from all over Douglas County, schools, students.
Okay, you kind of glossed over a little bit, but let me say we, because this is not something like, I think what's impressive about this stuff is you say we get some volunteers out there. I know it's you, your family gets involved. Yeah. And that we is what I think is the difference. Yeah. You get some good volunteers where other times if you wanted your government to help you, they like, oh, well, we need a committee. We got to pay to have this done. But you're like, nope, I'm just going to put the gloves on. Yeah. I'm going to get other people like-minded to do this stuff. Yeah. Yeah. That's what makes it different.
There's been a ton of volunteers, and there still is today, and they're awesome. They're honestly, without a lot of those people, I mean, I might not be doing it, because the reality is it's easy to get burned out and get discouraged. And other volunteers, other people in the community that kind of step up and come along, they kind of help keep the fire going. And because, yeah, it gets discouraging. We got rid of all the camping from Harvard to Garden Valley at the beginning, by the beginning of 2020. We'd cleaned up probably 24 camps. Tons of work, months of work by volunteers, the city, the county, like everyone was working together. We got this all, and then COVID hit, and the state basically said no shutting down camps, which basically gave, it was just like a license for people to do anything they want, live anywhere, and it set us back. I mean, immediately the camp just blew up. That was super discouraging. I mean, because when you work super hard on something for a long period, and it's a volunteer, and then to have it undone that quick, that was hard. So we had to switch. We kind of switched our efforts to like more beautification stuff. Like right in front of the duck pond, we did a whole bunch of tree planting and bushes, and we got a sign put in, and we just shifted the efforts more to what we could control. And we're still we're still doing those things today. And I think at the end of the day, we have to, the community and our local politicians, city council, mayor, everyone, and our like homeless advocates, we need to be resolved to keep our parks not for camping, but just for the community to enjoy. I think it's a devastating thing when a community loses its park. And people say, oh, you're not losing your parks. If people don't feel safe using the parks, if kids don't feel safe, if you can't send your kid to the park to play with their friend, if you feel like you have to go there with like protection or something like that, you've lost your park. That's one of the things, like we got to be resolved to not lose our parks, and find other places for people to live, other shelters, like creating new shelters, building new shelters, create a new low barrier. Yeah. And we just opened up one over Gary Leaf, the navigation center. Yeah. Awesome. That's great progress.
Yes. Great progress. Do you have any upcoming projects? Let's go there.
Yeah. So I'll tease a little bit. So we started a nonprofit this past year, Tracker Foundation, literally just to be kind of a vehicle to help take on a little bigger projects than just these little one-off ones we've been doing in the parks. Got the board founded. We've been doing a lot of administrative stuff, paperwork, getting tax. It is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And
all the paperwork.
All that to say, we're just about to start the first project, and I don't want to announce it yet because there's still a few details. We got to get everything all lined up before I want to get things signed and everything before, so that it's official before. Yeah. So, but yeah, we're really close. So I'm excited about it.
I love that. Let's go to the next thing here. Now, your last name is very famous in Roseburg, tied to
the football field.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
My great grandpa Gilbert. Yeah, he moved to Roseburg in 1910. He came out from Michigan. He had gotten his dental degree, basically, and he came out here to be a dentist. Anyways, once he got here, he just got involved and started volunteering. He was like a basketball coach, baseball, and worked with the baseball program. He coached the Roseburg High Indians basketball team to the 1916-17 basketball state title back then. Wild. So I don't know how much he volunteered with like the football program, but they ended up naming, the Finlay field after him. And then I think it's Finlay Avenue back there. There's a little row of houses back there. It's pretty cool. Yeah, I've got a little plug. Like, he and a buddy of his hiked to Crater Lake in like 1912 or 14. Whoa. There was no road at the time. It was just an old trail, basically. And they went up on horses and like had pack mules and everything. Well, he wrote letters all the way up. He basically documented the whole thing, and I have the letter. So, and it's actually really funny. So I'm actually going to publish it, and along with some photos. I think he got photos during the trip. So I'm trying to track those photos down.
Yeah, that's a piece of history.
He has some really funny stuff. His donkey throwing fit, literally throwing tantrums and rolling around, like rolling down the hill, refusing to carry his bags.
I love it. I cannot wait to read that. Who are your role models?
Especially like when in a local context. Growing up, I didn't know my great grandpa.
Okay.
But what my great grandpa had done for the community was always like on display for me. It's kind of really interesting. That was really powerful because I was like, the story like I just told, like people were asking me that. They've been asking me that my whole life. And that impacts you because it's kind of, even though he was gone, like he was still having an impact. Like just remembering his contribution to the community. And so I always looked, even though I didn't know my great grandpa, I always looked up to him. And then my grandpa followed in his footsteps. Like he was a dentist here.
Okay.
His whole career in Roseburg. But he was really active in Rotary and just volunteering all over the place, the Lamb Show, the fair, all sorts of things. That's what he did during retirement, was volunteer, and was very active in Rotary and out in Glide where they were living. He would always volunteer at like the visitor center there. I don't know if that's through the Forest Service. I think it's through the Forest Service. But yeah, and so that was impactful, right? Because then you're seeing your grandpa just always volunteering and just contributing to local projects and organizations. And then my dad, same thing. He really cared about he was also a dentist. So we had 100 years, over 100 years straight of dentists here in Roseburg. Yeah. So early 1900s till 2015 or something. Those three guys, big role models. My Christian faith. Yeah. I kind of had a life change when I was about 21. And that impacted me pretty big. Like that's actually when I became a youth pastor. Just wanted to help other people out, starting with kids, because I was still kind of a kid myself. Just having just gone through junior high and high school, tough time of your life. And so I know I definitely had a huge soft spot for other kids going through that difficult time of life. But that's still obviously that drives that. That's a big question, because it's like, well, why are you doing what you do? I have to earn a living. But deep down, I do this type of stuff because I really enjoy doing it. There's a lot of ways to make money. So it's not just like, oh, I'm just doing it, the notoriety or the press of it or things like that. I really do care about the community. So that's a big thing. And then the last is just my kids. I want this community, I want Roseburg and Douglas County, I want it to be a place that my kids would want to live. So I have 6 kids. I'm not going to be around here forever. Who knows? It might, we never know, right? Yeah. I mean, it could be tomorrow. Am I contributing and making this a better place for them? Are they going to want to live here? Are they going to want to raise their kids here? Are my grandkids going to, you know what I mean? And I think often in life we kind of get sucked into like the real short-term mindset where we're not investing in the long term. And the reality is that's kind of, the future generations kind of gets stuck with it's a little bit of a raw deal, right? You're like, everyone's just kind of living for themselves. And then there's a difference in mentality there. We need to have that longer term mentality. It is a motivation. Like there's a stadium at the high school that has my great grandfather's name on it. He was contributing. And it's not that pride thing. It's just, but I want to contribute to my kids, grandkids. They could look back and be like, oh wow, Grandpa Ryan, he used to do all these things, and like that was so cool. I think we should all be like that, not just for the glory of it all, but just you want to make your kids proud, right? And you want to set a good example for them. So
I'm going to throw you a curveball.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a curveball question, and I know you've been asked this question before.
Yeah.
Okay. But you mentioned community, trust, future, and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Would you ever run for a political office?
Yeah, I have been asked that a lot. Okay, the short answer is I don't want to. I wouldn't say never. Like in the right circumstances and environment, I might consider it. At the moment, it's a very challenging thing, right? And the way my personality is, I can't stand the bureaucracy and the red tape. I don't like just going to endless meetings. Life is short. And honestly, my propensity is I just want to get things done. Yes. And so if I can get things done without being in politics, then I'm not going into politics. Again, I'm very critical of national politics because I feel like it's just a big dumpster fire. The issues they're not being taken care of. It's like theater. I think there's just a lot to be improved even on local politics. I'll just leave it at that.
Completely respect. It was a sideball question.
Yeah, okay. No, that's good.
What messages do you want to get out?
Three categories here. We need to do whatever it takes to retain our young people in Roseburg. For a long time, I think the population of Roseburg hasn't changed much over the last 25, 30 years. It's just kind of like hovered around 20, 22,000, 24, whatever it is. So we have like whatever it is, 600 to 1,000 students that are graduating every year, and most leave. And the reality is it's just math. If you're graduating that many hundreds or almost 1,000, whatever it is, per year, and the population is staying approximately the same, you're not retaining your youth. And instead we're like, we've become kind of like a retirement community. And I think that's very foolish of our community. Our young people are the most valuable asset that we have, and we export them. And we shouldn't want to export them. Like we should want to retain them, because you pour into something, it's like, you don't want to pour into a tree for 18 years and all of a sudden just like cut it down and send it away. And everybody wants their kids to succeed. And I have 6 kids. I want my kids to succeed and the community to succeed, and I want them both to happen together. And I know it's a little bit of a mindset shift. Because a lot of people are like, oh, well, the only way they can succeed is if they go elsewhere. And then that's where success is. And that's not the case. People can succeed here. Pick any category. We have some of the top, we have incredible entrepreneurs that have come out of here and gone on to build huge companies all over the country, or they've gone on to become top programmers or top doctors and scientists, every field you can imagine, everywhere. And people are like, oh, well, they wouldn't have done that if they hadn't gone away. Successful people are successful no matter where they're at. Like, they can succeed anywhere. So I think we need to get over this thing that success does not have to happen. Like, we don't have to send our kids away. We can figure out how to help them succeed here. For example, we have a lot of big companies. You got Arenco, I'll just throw them out there. Okay, so start having more internships. Start getting more kids. You get a bunch of engineers, like, start getting them working out at Arenco when they're in high school, when they're in junior high. Start them young. Get them to the point where they basically have a job locked up. College only if they have to.
Right? Unheard of.
Yeah. Just start them younger. And the fact that we have the job market's crazy. Let's get on it, companies, and just keep going. Like, every company that's having a difficult time getting these workers, start looking local. Get the kids younger. I know kids can do absolutely unbelievable things if you raise the expectations a little bit. I've seen it with my own kids. My kids they're awesome kids, but we've just done things a little bit different. Anyways, I mean, I don't want to get distracted with that. We need to keep our entrepreneurs. We need to keep as many students. The hope was, for so long, the hope is like, oh, well, let's lure a company to Roseburg. It's like, no, build the companies here. I would have been one of those young entrepreneurs. I didn't get any encouragement as a kid, none from school and none from home, because my parents weren't that way. They were just typical professionals, right? Mom's a teacher, dad's a dentist. They weren't entrepreneurial. So if you don't get it at home, then you don't get it. But a community, there's lots of entrepreneurs. So, figure out a way. We're going to start doing it on the side. Me and a couple other people, or a handful of other people. We're just going to do it. And with my son, for example, we're going to find programmers. We're going to raise up more programmers locally. But anyways, I just want to encourage other people to do the same thing. Find kids, encourage them to start picking up skills, connect them with local companies, and just one at a time, you can completely transform a community.
Revolutionary.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just because the thing is those kids that leave and then they start the huge company elsewhere, if they would have been encouraged here when they were 13, 14, 15, the problem is you can't wait until they're out of high school to give them skills. It's completely insane. Like, when they're 13, they can change the world when they're 13. So I'll just use Moses. I always talk about Moses. He started programming when he was 8 years old, hours a day. And obviously he started spending more time when he was like 9, 10, 11, 12. But now he's 16. And it's like, dude, his programming abilities, he's beyond a computer science degree. He could work for any big tech company right now.
That's amazing. And you could live in Roseburg. Everything, you can work from home. I work from home now.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
He's a 16-year-old. So that's his skill level as a 16-year-old. High school diploma. He doesn't need to go to college. He doesn't need to graduate from high school.
Why the debt?
I mean, and I say that, obviously the tech industry is a little bit unique, just in the sense that they care about what you know. They want to see what you know. They want to see what you can build, and they will hire you. And you can live anywhere you want. And that's where the tech industry's at. So they're kind of at the leading edge of the new job market. The whole point is that's not unique. There's a lot of kids. Like, everybody's different. Not everyone's going to be a programmer. Not everyone's going to be a doctor. But there's a lot of kids that could do unbelievably amazing things, and they could stay here and build companies and work for amazing companies locally. And we're not tapping that talent at all. Yeah. And the big thing is that there has to be a mind shift from parents and teachers. Because at the end of the day, if somebody has a talking points, oh, we have this class and we have this class. The reality is, if parents don't believe that their kids can succeed without leaving Roseburg, then they're going to encourage their kids to leave. Yeah. If teachers don't believe that their students can succeed without leaving Roseburg, then they're going to encourage all their students to leave. Mm-hmm. And so until you start seeing those kids stay, then you know that the hearts haven't changed. So that's what needs to change. Like, teachers' hearts, parents' hearts, and then everyone has to work together to actually make it happen. Local businesses have to work and start scoop up the talent, get greedy about it, and spend more time, build a pipeline of training local kids, because they're extremely teachable. They can learn twice as fast as adults or more. There's a rapid pace. So
I think that's so interesting. You're tapping something. I think it's a future thing.
100%. I'm not going to call for the end of universities because there's a place for it. My dad was a dentist. Like there's certain degrees where you need to get very high level of training. But there's a lot of jobs you do not need to get a 4-year degree. The Rachel Polkran, the new UCC president, she's awesome. Jared Corden at the school district, he's awesome. They're working together. Build more of the training here. Get the kids the training at younger, when they're in school or when they're in high school, junior high. And then anything they absolutely can't get it out of the UCC. They still don't need to move away. Having a local community college, that's also a huge bonus for us. That's number one.
I know, that's a good number one, though.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if that thing happens, that's long-term transformational for the community. Yeah. Like we're a depressed community. We're still on the coattails of old, like the logging industry type of thing. So my whole thing is like, why don't we have new industries? Well, the answer is, we haven't lured them here. So like, why don't we have a tech industry? There's no excuse why we can't build a tech industry here. Me personally, that's what my son and I are doing. We're building a software company. How do you do that? You just do it. You figure out a product, you build it, you go to market with it, you learn, you iterate, you raise up your own product. I couldn't afford my son. I couldn't afford that. Like that's one of the problems with why it's difficult to start startups in little tiny communities is because people can't afford to. You can't pay $200,000 for an engineer. You got to raise your own engineers. Like that's the whole thing. Like that's the hack. Raise the workers yourself. And then it's also a little sneak attack. It's like how to get my son to stay, right? He owns half the company. So yeah, anyways, but what other industries could we do? I think we're going to get a tech industry. Like I'm already starting to see I had just had a coffee with a guy who just moved back. He worked for a big tech company, grew up in the area, moved back. He's buying a house here now. We'll share his story soon. But it's awesome. It's happening. Like people can live wherever they want. And Douglas County is a beautiful place. Roseburg's a beautiful place. Like you get it. Now you can work for companies they're not headquartered here. So you can live here and get involved. At number 2, I put down, we need to kind of drop the scarcity, kind of the depressed mindset. Scarcity mindset's like basically you're just assuming that nothing's ever going to improve. The pie is fixed. And so you're just like sitting there, you're just scrounging around. You want your little tiny little slice of the pie and you're fighting everyone else for it. It's a wrong mentality because it just assumes that we can't grow. We can't, like when I say grow, I'm not like, oh, let's, not like lure in tourists to live here. Growing is just simply like keeping more of the youth that we're already raising here. So growing would be just succeeding by like a higher percentage of them just being able to work at local companies. And, that's healthy growth. When you get out of that mindset, no, there's plenty to go around. We're going to be fine. Like it's not this, and then it's just an optimism. And I think it's starting to change. Like we've been at this I've been back for 4.5 years now, and there's a movement going on right now. There's a lot of movement, and it's in a lot of different areas. And even though there's still some discouraging things happening, optimism is growing. There's movement downtown. People are like, oh, downtown's dying. It's like, no, like Janelle and I are working on a momentum map down there, and there's a ton of businesses that are moving in. So people say it's dying, but people are investing their dollars and they're moving downtown. They're starting their businesses down there. They're moving their restaurants there. They're renovating buildings. More housing's going there. There's a lot of momentum happening right now. I think the best thing to do is if people recognize that kind of, because I've talked to a lot of people that are just like, I just found myself kind of, it's like they're just depressed. Like nothing's ever going to change here. You just have to admit that you have to own that that's your mindset, and you just have to believe that it can get better. Like it's kind of like it's a belief, and that you can help make it better. And then you're going to do, and you're just going to do whatever it takes to try to help. And a lot can change, especially if you get a lot of people doing that. And I think that's what's happening. It's kind of snowballing. Yes. The last one is just to encourage people to get involved, volunteer, and show up. You're going to hear a lot more about this in the coming years, but like volunteerism was kind of a generational, sadly, it's like almost like a generational thing. It's like my grandpa's generation. Dude, they were like, if you think about all the volunteer clubs, like the Rotary and the JCs and the American Legion, all this stuff, I think they came back from the war and they got all these clubs. There are all these volunteer clubs and organizations like everywhere, and they bought buildings and they organized, and that went on for decades. And it's not continuing. Like the younger generations, the number of volunteers are just dropping off a cliff. And I don't know. I mean, that's obviously, it's a really long conversation, like why that is. Ultimately, if you live in Roseburg and you live in Douglas County, like we need to take ownership of this area. And if you do, then like you need to get involved and step up. I'm not saying like sacrifice all your time, but like find a way to improve the area, find a way to help people, pick a park. I mean, I was just writing down a random thing, find a problem, like adopt a park wherever you live and just like get involved and help. Even if you only have a couple hours a week, that would make a big improvement. It would encourage other people. It improves the city, improves the county. And then imagine this is where like anything could be accomplished if you get enough people volunteering. Anything, any project could be accomplished. The money could be raised, the work could be done. And we just need more people to get involved. My third encouragement.
I love it. Those are all, I mean, so important things that would be such a shift on the zeitgeist, the things that could change. I love it. Well, shoot, before we wrap up here, we have a couple more questions. We're going to do favorite sandwich, favorite movie, because we ask everyone.
Favorite sandwich?
Yes.
Meat, cheese, and avocado sandwich.
Okay.
San Francisco bun.
All right.
Toasted. Everything on it. And the old people, the friends over at Between the Buns, I've gotten that same sandwich every single time I've gone in there for like 24 years.
I love it.
Yeah, same sandwich.
Should be named after you.
No. But I know it's just, it's like the best sandwich I've ever had. And I'm super stoked that it's been basically unchanged. Like, changed owners, but they kept it on. They kept the same ingredients, the recipes, everything. I'm like super, I go in there quite a bit. Favorite movie? I had to do two. Chariots of Fire is the all-time favorite, just like super motivational. We grew up watching it all the time. And then we had the soundtrack in our car or the cassette. And we'd go on family trips and da-na-na-na-na. We'd listen to it over and over. And now it's just, it's like, and it was my dad's favorite. When I hear that music, it just floods me with all the good memories because it was always like family trips to the beach and the mountains. But then the second one was October Sky. And that one, just like it was, first of all, I love the story. I love the movie, but I related to a lot. Just, I was the odd duck growing up because going against the path of starting your own business, like basically not going down the straight little narrow path that like, okay, you'd wildly succeed in public school and then you go to college and you do this and like, this is how your life goes. Like, I just basically just kind of rejected that. And I wasn't a good student, but it's just because the traditional school environment wasn't for me. Like I am who I am. I have giftings. I have weaknesses. My weaknesses it made learning in a traditional like lecture style like really difficult. I'm a really hands-on. The guy in there, like he kind of rejected his dad's. His dad was like a coal miner, remember, and he wanted to build rockets, and he didn't get any support. And he got massive pushback. And my dad was more supportive. My dad was awesome. My dad was super supportive. But at the same time, like they weren't highly encouraging me to like go out and start my own business. Like they tolerated it and said, you know what I mean? Like I'm not throwing my mom or dad under the bus. I'm just saying it was kind of a generational thing. I mean, when I was at Linus Oaks, 100% of the residents there, they all gave me the same advice. You just, whatever you do, you got to get your college degree. And it was like 100%. And I know that they loved me and when they were sending those things. So it wasn't like, I'm not listening. Anyways, so it's just, whenever I watch this, super motivational. I just love it. The fact that he succeeded. And granted, I think he ended up going on. That was part of the story. He had to got his college degree so he could go build rockets. And I was just like, oh, okay. So it was just the fact he knew what he wanted to do. He knew what he was gifted in, and he just went after it. Yeah. And even if that's not the traditional path, like I love encouraging people. And his dad comes around and like goes, I mean, we could talk about the movie for a long time, but like his teacher.
Yes.
There's always somebody, right? Without sharing the stories, I'll share that there's teachers like that have that big of an impact on students here in Douglas County. And I've heard of a couple of the stories. Yeah. Massive impact. Like broken homes where it was like one teacher spent extra time with a student, just encouraged them, maybe gave them some advice like, look, it kind of gave them the pep. You can do encouragement. Maybe it was the encouragement they're not getting at home, but like profoundly changed a kid's life. And I just love that. I love that it was just that his science teacher. And teachers are rock stars. They can have a massive impact. Any adults in our community, parents. I mean, ideal is if the parents are in the situation and they can do that for their kid. Encourage your kid, and root them on.
All right. Last question. So if people want to get a hold of you, if they want to reach out to volunteer or see what you got going on, what's the best way to get a hold of Ryan?
Yeah, so if you want to get involved in some of the projects that at least we're doing, go to trackerfoundation.com. We'll have like a volunteer sign up. Basically, and it's an email list, and we'll be putting up posts for at least the projects that we're kind of initiating and just volunteer opportunities, but also just Roseburg Tracker, roseburgtracker.com or the Roseburg Tracker Facebook group. We're often sharing volunteer opportunities across the community.
Ryan, I got to tell you, very, very interesting interview. I think just an interesting guy. I really respect the background and just that very relatable. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
And for all our listeners out there, we're at the Oregon Files podcast at yahoo.com. Podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube, and that is it. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks.